On May 21st, 2024, Daniel Patterson and Penji Sherpa stood on the top of Mount Everest. For Daniel, a 40-year-old British climber, this was the moment he'd dreamed of for years. He wasn't just climbing for himself. He was raising money for a family fighting cancer. For Penji, an experienced Sherpa guide, it was another day on the mountain he knew so well. But as they started their descent, things took a turn for the worse. Before we go on, I'm on a road to 1,000 subs as a small channel. If you want to help me and be part of the journey, subscribe. The path down was packed with climbers, all trying to navigate the narrow ridge. The weather had been unusually warm, making the snow soft and unstable. Huge overhangs of snow and ice, called cornices, lined the edge of the ridge. They looked solid, but could collapse at any moment. Daniel and Penji knew the risks, but they had no choice. They had to get down. As they made their way past the Hillary Step, a steep and dangerous part of the climb, they hit a traffic jam. The ridge was crowded with climbers, all clipped to the safety ropes, moving slowly. To save time, Daniel and Penji decided to unclip from the ropes and go around the slower group. It was a risky move, but delays on Everest can be deadly. Every second counts when you're running out of oxygen. Then, at around 10 a.m., disaster struck. The cornice beneath them gave way. A huge section of snow and ice broke off with a loud crack, and the ground simply disappeared. Climbers on the ridge watched in horror as the safety ropes snapped tight, saving some. But Daniel and Penji, who had unclipped to pass, had nothing to hold them. They fell with the collapsing snow, tumbling down the Kangshung face, a steep, deadly drop into Tibet. The scene was chaos. Climbers on the ridge looked down, hoping to see some sign of Daniel and Penji, but the slope was too steep, and the area below was impossible to see. The death zone, as it's called above 8,000 meters, is merciless. There's barely any oxygen, and rescue missions are almost impossible. It didn't take long for the truth to sink in. Daniel and Penji were gone. News of the tragedy spread quickly. At base camp, climbers and guides learned that 2 lives had been lost. Penji, a skilled and respected Sherpa, was deeply mourned. Daniel too was remembered, a man who had climbed not for glory, but to help others. Their deaths were a heartbreaking reminder of the risks of Everest. For Daniel and Penji, the mountain was both a dream and a deadly gamble. Their story is one of courage, sacrifice, and the high price of chasing the summit. While Daniel and Penji's story is a reminder of the risks climbers face, it's also important to remember those who know Everest best, the Sherpas. Among them, few were as legendary as Babu Chiri Sherpa, a man who summited Everest 10 times and set records that still stand today. But even for Babu, the mountain had a price. Babu Chiri Sherpa was born in Nepal's Khumbu region, surrounded by the towering peaks of the Himalayas. For him, the mountains weren't just a backdrop. They were a way of life. Like many Sherpas, he started as a porter, carrying gear for climbers. But Babu was different. By the age of 16, he was guiding expeditions, and over time, he became one of the greatest climbers in Everest's history. He summited the mountain 10 times, a feat few could match. But Babu wasn't just climbing for himself. He dreamed of building schools and improving lives in his community, using his climbs to raise money for those in need. In 2001, during his 11th Everest expedition, Babu was at Camp 2, a spot 6,500 meters above sea level. It was a routine day on the mountain, and Babu was seen walking near the edge of camp, possibly taking photos. But then, something went wrong. He slipped and fell into a crevasse, a deep crack in the ice. At first, no one noticed he was missing. It wasn't until dinner time that the others realized Babu hadn't returned. A search party was formed, and by midnight, they found the crevasse Babu had fallen into. The fall had been fatal. The next morning, 2 Sherpas carefully descended into the narrow gap to retrieve his body. It took nearly 60 Sherpas 8 hours to bring Babu down the mountain, navigating the treacherous icefall and crevasses. The man who had conquered Everest so many times had been taken by the very mountain he loved. Babu's death was a profound loss. At just 33 years old, he had already achieved more than most climbers do in a lifetime. His records on Everest, like spending 21 hours on the summit without oxygen, remain unmatched. But his greatest legacy wasn't his climbs, it was his work for his community. The schools he helped build brought education to a region that had none, and his foundation continues to support development projects in Khumbu. Babu's life was a testament to the strength and resilience of the Sherpa spirit. His death is a reminder that even the greatest are not immune to Everest's dangers. Babu Chiri's story shows how even the most experienced climbers can fall victim to Everest's dangers. But sometimes, the mountain claims lives in ways that are even more unexpected. This was the case for Tomas Olsson and Tormod Granheim, two adventurers who dreamed of doing the impossible, skiing down Everest's north face. On May 16, 2006, Tomas Olsson stood on the summit of Everest. A Swedish adventurer and extreme skier, Tomas had spent years preparing for this moment. He had climbed peaks all over the world, driven thousands of miles to reach Everest's base, and trained hard in Chamonix. But this climb wasn't just about reaching the top. Tomas had a bigger goal. He wanted to ski down Everest's north face, something very few people had ever tried. Tomas wasn't alone. His friend Tormod Granheim, a Norwegian climber, was with him. Together, they planned to climb the mountain via the Mallory route and then ski down the Great Couloir, also known as the Norton Couloir. This route is one of the most dangerous on Everest, steep, exposed, and unforgiving. But for Tomas and Tormod, the risk was worth it. They were chasing a dream. The climb to the summit was tough. It took them 14 hours battling through a snowstorm and freezing temperatures. But they made it. At noon on May 16th, they stood on top of the world. Exhausted but determined, Tomas knew the hardest part was still ahead, the ski down. After a short rest, they started their descent. The first part went okay, but then disaster struck. Tomas's left ski broke near the binding. On Everest, a broken ski can be deadly. Tomas and Tormod tried to fix it with tape and climbing gear, but the repair didn't hold. They had no choice but to keep going. Time was running out. When they reached a rocky cliff about 45 meters high, they decided to abseil down. Finding a secure anchor was hard. The rock was solid, and there wasn't much ice to hold the ropes. They improvised, using 2 snow stakes and an ice axe to anchor the rope. Tomas went first, struggling with the broken ski. About 30 meters down, the anchor failed. Tomas fell into the Norton Couloir, dropping 10 to 15 meters before hitting the ground. The impact probably knocked him out. Unable to stop himself, he slid further down the steep slope, disappearing into the Rongbuk Glacier below. For Tormod, the nightmare wasn't over. Moments after Tomas's fall, his oxygen mask broke. Now, he had to get down the mountain alone. Carefully, he climbed down the rocky cliff, using a rope he no longer trusted. From there, he skied down the couloir, following Tomas's path. He found Tomas's ice axe and crampons, but saw no signs that Tomas had tried to stop his fall. The snow was untouched, confirming Tormod's worst fear. Tomas had been unconscious after the fall. Tomas's body was found the next day at 6,700 meters. His death was the 8th on Everest that season, a grim reminder of the mountain's dangers. For Tormod, the loss was personal. Tomas had been more than a teammate. He was a friend. Their dream of skiing Everest's north face ended in tragedy, but Tomas's spirit lives on in the mountains he loved. Tomas's story, like those of Daniel, Penji, and Babu, shows that Everest is more than just a mountain. It's a place where dreams and danger collide. Daniel, Penji, Tomas, and Babu. 4 lives, 4 dreams, and 1 mountain. Everest is a place of extremes, breathtaking beauty and deadly danger, triumph and tragedy. These climbers' stories remind us that the mountain doesn't care about dreams or preparation. It demands respect, and sometimes it demands a price. For those who dare to climb Everest, the risks are always there. Crowded routes, unpredictable weather, and the thin air of the death zone make every step a gamble. But still, the mountain calls. It calls to the adventurers, the dreamers, and the determined. And as these stories show, the cost of the summit can be unimaginably high.